This is Pod Strangely Warmed, a place where we tell the good Methodist story, where we have conversations that invite followers of Jesus to seek after that loving, just, and free world that God imagines for us all, and have a little fun along the way. In this season on the podcast, we celebrate that it's Advent. For this Advent, we wrote a book, and the we here is my neighbors in the HEB area today. I am thankful for my book writing partners at FUMC Hurst, Pastor Ybanez and Pastor Matt, as well as Pastor Katie at St. Paul, helped us write a book as we heard Christ's invitation to join our communities and you in moving into the neighborhood. We're back as we move on this Advent journey into the neighborhood, and you know we are back because birthday boy Jesus is back and here. We are here for week 2 of this journey into the neighborhood, where we recall what it means to be good neighbors, joining Jesus as becoming Word made flesh in our neighborhood while also meeting him already there. Last week, we talked a little bit about what it means to first see, to see with intentionality and embrace the responsibility that comes with that, right? Today, we move on to the next step in the process, the next step that we get from that story of the Good Samaritan. First, we see, and then we have compassion. To help us with this, Katie, you are going to help unpack what compassion means for us and how do we embody that spirit and sense of compassion. Thanks for being here first. Yes. And teach us up. Help us understand.
I will try my best. I don't consider myself an expert on compassion. I feel I'm a student of compassion, but so yeah, in the Good Samaritan story, we first see him see the person that is beaten, bloodied, left for dead on the road. And then the very next verse says he saw him and he had compassion. And that compassion has a couple of elements to it. At first, I think it's important to first start defining what compassion is. Yeah. Compassion, the literal definition of compassion is to feel with. And it's to feel with one's gut, one's heart, and one's soul, kind of the entirety of one's being with another. It's something that involves sharing and recognizing our shared humanity, our shared vulnerability and connection with one another. And so for the Good Samaritan, he had compassion on an emotional level, connecting with this man. But compassion not only has this relational connection, but also an action component too, that it leads us to move to doing something about it, to doing something kind. And Dr. Brené Brown, in her book Atlas of the Heart, which is kind of a dictionary of emotions, if you will, she talks a lot about, or she has a section in there talking about compassion. And she defines compassion as having 2 elements in it. And one is relational understanding, and that's this idea of seeking to understand and connect with another person, understand their story and where they're from and what they're going through. And it's I talk a little bit more about that in the book that we wrote. It's an action of perspective taking that we seek to understand another person's perspective, kind of that old quote that you hear, like walking a mile in their shoes, or just seeing what it's like in another person's shoes. Yeah. So compassion first, I think, has this connection of relational understanding, building relationship, understanding what another person's perspective is and what they're going through. And then the second part is action, leading to doing something kind. So for the Good Samaritan story, for him, that was leading him to bandage the wounds, to take him to the inn, to take care of him and pay his way as he stayed there as well. And I think it's important as we talk about compassion as Christians, as followers of Christ, that we need to distinguish between compassion and pity, because sometimes we confuse the two. And when we think about pity to me is like thinking, oh, I pity this person. This poor, helpless soul that needs my help, or this old poor person, what they're going through. But pity, Dr. Brené Brown talks about in her book, is what she defines as the near enemy of compassion. That in pitying, we are otherizing ourselves from another person, that we're either consciously or unconsciously thinking and acting like we are better than the other person. But compassion is not that way at all. Compassion is recognizing our shared human connection, our shared humanity, our shared vulnerability. And I think it's also important for me to note that we don't have to have the exact same experiences as someone to have compassion. We can even if we don't have the same experience of what someone else is going through, we do know what it is to feel pain, to feel vulnerable, to feel shame. And we can connect and have compassion on another person, even though we don't have the exact same experiences. Empathy doesn't require the exact same experiences. And in the Advent devotional book that we wrote, I didn't get a chance to share this story about compassion, but I wanted to share it here if that's okay, because I wanted to have an opportunity to share it, because it's a story that's been meaningful for me in my own faith journey, and I think it really exemplifies what compassion is, with this two components of relational understanding and action. And a couple of years ago, I had an opportunity to go to the Academy for Spiritual Formation, and the speaker that year, it was in 2019, was Dr. Frank Rogers. And I would not call myself a compassion expert. I'm kind of a student of compassion
guy.
But he's actually a compassion expert.
He wrote the book titled Compassion.
He wrote a book called Practicing Compassion. Right. Yeah, he's actually written multiple books on compassion. But so obviously he spoke about compassion at that academy, and he had some really profound stories to share. And one just really spoke to me from his own life story. And bear with me, it's a little bit of a story. But he and his family went through a difficult thing. Their dog died. And if any of y'all, I don't know if any of y'all have pets. You have dogs in your house. Do you have dogs in your house?
We don't. We have 8 humans or 7 humans, and that's plenty.
Okay, that's plenty plenty of people in the house, plenty of creatures. Anyhow, but their dog died. And so for anyone that has a dog or any kind of pet, it's a hard thing to lose a pet and a family member. And so his family was grieving this loss of their dog that had died, and have a lot of memories over all the years. And his son and him decided that they were going to go bury this dog in a park in their community. And this park was the dog's favorite park that would run and play chase and play catch-in, lots of sweet memories. And so they decided to go bury this beloved dog in this park. But the day that they did this was a Saturday where there was a race happening in their town. And so streets were jam-packed with all the things, all the cars and whatnot. And so he had to drive around for 30 minutes with a dead dog in the back of his car and couldn't find a parking space. And you can imagine it as the grief and feeling stressed and just wanting to, and having other things to do that day, he was getting stressed. And but finally, they found a parking spot in front of this house in the neighborhood near the park. And right as they get out of the car, this man comes running out of that house, starts yelling at them. You got to leave. You cannot park here. You've got to go. And his initial gut in this stressful, anxious, angry, sad circumstance that he was in, he wanted to respond kind of bowing up and being angry and respond with this is public property, not private property. I can park here, I can do what I want, kind of thing. But instead of that, he kind of held his tongue on that, and he suspended that judgment in his own heart, and he began a conversation with the man. And forgive me, I don't remember all the details of the conversation because it's been a minute since it happened. But he ended up having a conversation about what he was going through, and then also what the man was going through. And he ended up, through this conversation, through getting curious, through engaging in this perspective taking, asking questions, he ended up finding out that this man had a really traumatic event in his own life that was causing him to respond to him parking in that way. Yeah. And that traumatic event was actually something really serious. And it was he moved here from another country, and in that other country he had a car that had an IED blast that killed a child in the community in front of his house. And so, as you guys can imagine, no wonder he is not wanting anyone to park in his house, because it's the fear and the trauma. And then obviously Frank got to share, why he was coming in to park there, that he was going to bury their beloved dog. And what could have been a circumstance of anger and fighting and tension with one another ended up being a moment of deep compassion with and for one another, the shared vulnerability, shared connection, and an acting in compassion for one another. And I don't know, I just wanted to share that story because it really spoke to me on what compassion is and what it looks like, especially in our season and era of being tempted to be people of judgment and anger and being quick to be angry with people, but choosing a way and an invitation to choose a way of compassion with others. So that's my little spiel about compassion.
I so love that, and that combination, because what the story so vividly shows for us, what it means to feel with somebody, right? Either one of them could have sat in their own moment, in their own grief, and felt independently and said, to heck with you. But they were willing to feel with each other, right? To embrace each other's pain, to know that, to experience that, but then also to be moved toward greater action, right? That feeling with and perspective taking in combination there. So thankful. I was there in 2019 as well at that academy, and sometimes you leave events like that inspired and amazed and all of that. I left that going, man, I am a crappy Christian.
You did?
Because he was so,
Tell me
he
more.
embodied that spirit of compassion.
He did.
I received it as a challenge, right? And an invitation to be better and to do better, right? Now, what I also learned by reading the book and engaging more is that sometimes the greatest compassion we give is not just to others, but to ourselves, right? And so how do we understand in the midst of that? So that's a half joke, but also half real, right? We leave going, man alive, okay. I don't know that I could have been that full-hearted, right, in that moment, but I'm thankful he was.
Yeah.
You said just a second ago that pity and compassion were, what was the phrase?
Near enemies of one another.
Okay.
That's a language that Dr. Brené Brown uses in her book, is near enemies.
That is such a powerful reminder, because sometimes when we think of compassion, especially here in the South, we imagine sweet little Southern ladies with their sweet tea going, oh, bless your heart, right?
Yes.
And what is bless your heart? That is
It's
you
pity.
over there, and that's me over here, and that is pity personified, right? There is no coming alongside somebody with a bless your heart, right? It is sucks to be
It is
you.
that otherizing.
It's I'm creating distance and space between you and me here, where compassion is one that says, actually, let's come near.
Building that human connection.
Yeah. Deep and profound in a meaningful way, right? As you think about compassion and where it meets this work of moving into the neighborhood, right? We acknowledge that it begins with seeing, right? And the next step, both in the scriptures and in our lives, is to kind of have compassion. What might that look like? I love the very personal story, right? But also, what does that look like in the midst of kind of as a community, right? What's it mean to have compassion around us? I think it ties to what we talked a little bit about last week, right? We talked seeing having responsibility, right? Seeing does come with seeing not only the hurt, harm, and trouble, but the good that surrounds us, right? But if compassion is to feel with, and if it's the second step, seeing both the hurt, harm, and trouble and the God beloved and God giftedness around us, there's ways we can feel with both of those.
Absolutely.
That means that, like, if our community's partying, guess who needs to be partying too, right?
Yeah.
Who needs to be celebrating? Who needs to be coming alongside, right? This fall, the Rangers won the World Series, and I think it's an act of compassion to celebrate with that, right? Especially if we wrangle our Houston Astros friends along the way, right? That's probably not true. This is why I left feeling like a bad Christian. But if there is great joy in our community, part of feeling with our community is celebrating in that, right? And not going, oh, that's their joy, having it somehow become our joy too, right? That removing that otherness in the midst of that. But also when it comes to struggle, right? The scripture tells the story of the man who is beaten, robbed, and left naked and for dead, right? He saw and he had compassion, right? He felt with him and he moved to action to come alongside him in the midst of that.
It's part of my experience in neighboring and especially when churches want to help, and the helping, caring, and serving work that we do so often brings us into close contact with people who are living in poverty. People who are living in poverty have experienced they've experienced trauma at higher rates than you talk about disproportionality, disparity. And those experiences, living in poverty has sort of a culture to itself, and the experience of trauma is like putting on another set of glasses through which you see the world. Okay. And what so many of over the years, so many volunteers who go to read with children at Project Transformation, or or who go and deliver a bed to a family that's in the CPS system and they need some furniture, and it brings you into close contact with people that you aren't normally in contact with, and those challenges are as you encounter that culture of difference, which is so different than what we may be used to, it can be utterly shocking to have that experience. And I've spent a lot of time with kids in the CPS foster care system, and it can be so easy to ask, okay, what is wrong with that kid? When somebody does something that's unexpected, right? Unexpected behaviors generate alarm, fear, discomfort, right? But if you can reframe that question as an act of perspective taking, right? So instead of what's wrong with that kid, what happened? To this kid.
What's behind the...
Yes.
Yeah.
You can begin to try and peel back the layers. That invites connection and invites relationship. It creates space to allow somebody to begin to share and tell a story, like the guys in the front yard. That perspective taking is so critical to allow something real to form there.
Yeah.
And we need that so much these days. I mean, you talk about how polarized we are, how otherized we are. Like we need that time of coming together, that perspective taking to really have compassion, especially on those that are different from us, that think differently and have lived different lives.
Well, and what you named for us earlier, we don't have to have lived the same experiences in order to have compassion. We don't have to have experienced the exact same trauma or the exact same heartbreak, the exact same joy, right? To not show. To still come alongside, right? To still have compassion, to still kind of feel with and be willing to do the hard work of and the patient work of sitting with somebody and peeling back those layers, asking, not only what is happening, but how did we get here, right? What is going on in the background? What informed this? And yet that's not always the easiest thing to do. In fact, it's probably pretty hard. No. That's why we're invited to do it as we seek to move into the neighborhood. I think so often that distinction between compassion and pity is one we miss. And we think as long as we take proper action, it's all good, right? As long as we help to alleviate a need, it's all good. As long as we, and we forget about the spirit we're bringing to the action, right? And not only how does this make me feel, but how is this structured in a way that makes the care recipient feel, right? Or the person in our community feel? How does it make our neighbor feel, right? I know we've had a lot of conversations over the years about how do we structure our helping ministries, right? In a way that honors and dignifies, and as we seek to make whatever financial need whole or food need whole or whatever, that we don't make the spirit less whole, right? That we don't harm the human in trying to meet the basic physical need. And so I wonder, where are you guys seeing this kind of compassion, this living, feeling with, right, and coming alongside in the midst of the lived reality of our neighborhoods today? Where do you see kind of that spirit of compassion lived out in this day and in this time?
Well, I see it in my actual neighborhoods because I have some really strong relationships with our neighbors, and some of those relationships, I think the other part, there's mutuality in the compassion too, right? Yeah, because the pity is the otherizing, but the mutuality in that. And I shared this story in my devotional about an act of compassion with my neighbors in the midst of I'm a new mom this year, and when I first had our baby, it was really tough. I mean, you guys are both parents, it's hard the first few weeks, but I had neighbors that came alongside to support and act in compassion, but they've also have been there and are able to share, come alongside me and say, hey, I know this is hard. I've been here too, and kind of being that listening, supportive presence. And one person in particular was one that is our across the street neighbors, the Bolstad family, and they both were sat with me and loved on us and held our baby when we needed a little break, but also acted in compassion through meals and through offering to get things at the grocery store. That's kind of like the actions of compassion. But I see compassion through my actual neighbors and the ways in which they love our community and love our family well, personally.
We've got a shared community partner, Mission Central, that serves all 3 of our communities. And one of their core values as an organization is compassion. And one of the things that I've heard their social workers talk about is so often when somebody comes to Mission Central, whether they're seeking assistance, looking for a job or food or whatever it is that the need is, that so often that's not the thing that's really under the surface.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they're so careful to do, because of this core value of compassion, is to sit down with a person to begin to create space for them to share and tell their story.
Yeah.
And to be seen and to be heard, and to have their being validated in such a way that you might have come here for food today, but something else probably helped create a situation where you needed food, and let's unpack that a little bit. And and I so value the way that Mission Central treats our neighbors with compassion. People talk about there's a warmth and a welcome when they walk into the door that's very unassuming, that doesn't feel like pity, and just bless your heart, but a real desire for relationship, and I really cherish the fact that that's a community partner that we get to work with.
Well, and
For the work.
we talk about the power of seeing. This is where those intersectionalities come in, right? Because in saying, I'm living out of that core value of compassion, I so love that they do that, because it says, I see you enough and you matter enough that I could give you food in 2.4 seconds, right? Or we could call the electric company and pay a bill in 2.4 seconds. In some ways, the quick fix is the quick fix. It's the easy thing. But I care about you more than just the quick fix, right? And we care about you more than that. And so we're going to sit and know your story. We're going to sit and feel with you in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love too how Mission Central, in those conversations that you have with the people, clients coming in, and that you connect them with all the resources to build that community up, which that's compassion too, but also it's coming alongside to connect with the community too. It's a neat ministry in our community with a lot of compassion for sure. So,
as we think about compassion together, right? We've named a lot of examples here, but what kind of invitation would you give to maybe your neighbor or maybe your community of faith, right? We're making this in part for both individuals within community of faith, but also for all of our entire communities of faith. They're going to be walking through this journey as they explore what compassion looks like day to day. We've seen what it looks like in our neighborhood. I know I've experienced it. We've recently lost my mom, and so to see folks not just go, "Oh, bless your heart," and pat me on the head, right? But to truly go, when I've lost someone, these are the 5 things that I needed most. Do any of them meet where you're at, and which one can we provide to help come alongside, right? Including just sitting and letting you talk, right? Because so often we as preachers are the caregivers, that we often struggle to be the care receivers. But the few folks who've come to me and looked me in the eye with the true, authentic kind of wholeheartedness, right? And said, anytime you need to talk, we'll go buy brisket, eat some good food, and just talk, right? That's an incredible gift.
Yeah, that's
right?
an act of compassion.
And for me, compassion coming alongside with barbecue is a really a double hit of fantastic goodness, right? And so, I think that invitation to know each other well, I think, is part of mine, right? To know your neighbors, to see your neighbors, to come to know your neighbors a little more fully, right? So that when they have a time of incredible celebration where, we see God's belovedness and goodness alive and at work in their lives in a meaningful way, we can come alongside and celebrate that in a way that's meaningful to the human in our neighborhood, to our neighbor, right? But also in a moment where struggle comes, right? Or heartbreak comes, or life just gets hard, right? Our kids are like 4.5 to 5 years apart. We've got 3, and that's far enough to where you forget what those first 3 weeks are like every single time. And so,
I'm sure.
as you're talking, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, the sleep. What is that, right? So that when those times come, right, folks are able to be there for us, but we're also able to be there for them, right? We're able to see and know them well enough to know how well do we come alongside you, right? And that I think one of the refrains that we've heard throughout the writing of this book and the crafting of these podcasts is that this neighboring thing is not a fast thing.
No.
Neighboring is slow. Compassion is not a fast thing.
No.
Compassion is slow.
Yeah.
To go back to your story a little bit earlier, the fast thing to do is to flip the guy the bird and hop back in the car and go drive and park somewhere else, right? It's slow to engage in the really hard conversation as you've got a dead dog in the back of your car and your kid is crying in the front seat and you've got a neighbor who's coming at you with anger, right? That's hard and slow. And yet, how are both of their lives made better and enriched for slowing down enough to see their neighbor well, to feel with them, to come alongside them, to experience that moment of togetherness in the midst of that. And so for me, it's know your neighbors well, even when it's a slow burn, right? We've moved how many times? 8 times. So we've lived in 9 different neighborhoods, right? And some of those times we don't get to know our neighbors well for 2 years. And then there's some people on your block that you get to know almost immediately because that's just their spirit and they click with you and you click with them and that's the way it worked. But every time, whether it's been slow or long, when we've done the work of knowing our neighbors well, our whole community experience is enriched. So my invitation would be to take the time to know your neighbors and to so that when celebration and struggle comes, you can have compassion in a real way. What would you guys add to that?
I would just briefly add that to look for opportunities to where you can walk in the way of compassion in your everyday life, because there's everyday life examples, whether it's showing up with a compassionate response with your spouse or with your kids or with your driving on the road, maybe. We haven't talked about that at all, but there's great opportunities for showing compassion on the road. And even though you can't always have a conversation with someone on the road, you can have that in your head perspective taking of having a gracious interpretation of what that other person might be going through on the roadway. That's, for me, something very practical.
You mean all the other drivers aren't just jerks?
No.
Oh, okay.
They're beloved children of God that I imagine are going through some hard things because everyone is going through something hard in their life.
Yeah.
So,
amen. Thank you. Matt, do you have anything to drop on us?
I'm just listening. This is great.
Okay. Well, very good. Very good. If we can take that act of perspective taking, that is such a powerful gift on the road and at every step of our journey, because everybody's carrying a weight. We just don't always know what that weight is. And if we're going to live as people of compassion fully in our neighborhood, being willing and able to do that is profound and deeply, deeply important. Well, thank you both for being here for this. Thank you for Birthday Jesus for always showing up. It is
ready to party.
Ready to party. And thank you for joining us as we continue to try to move into the neighborhood just like Jesus this Advent season. Until next time, I'm Daniel Hawkins. This is Pod Strangely Warmed. This has been Pod Strangely Warmed. If you enjoyed our conversation today, know that you can find us anywhere you find podcasts. On Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, any and all the places, we are there. So if you want to continue the good United Methodist conversation that you've been a part of today, find us, like us, rate us, review us, and share with a friend so that the good news that is happening right here in our own midst can amplify even